First,
Welcome to
live,
Fox 12
local.
YouTube channel.
This is Fox 12 Now.
We're going to have you be our pretend vet. I'm going to be with you. Okay.
So we're going to see this.
Just 1 second here. We're having kind of an. Looks like, does anybody have something playing in the background by chance? Okay.
Nope.
All right. Okay. We got you up now. And we're live. So hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Appreciate you joining us here for our live show. And again, we're live. We're live streaming here on our apps. We're on our website. And we, of course, are here on social media as well. And we get to talk about a lot of different things here at our digital news desk. And we get to do it with all of you joining in as well. And right now we're talking about dam removal, something that probably we've all been reading about, some of the different ways and reasons that that's happening. And now there is some research that helps actually analyze what the cost is associated with that as we see these different dam removal projects go forward. And that's what we're going to be discussing right now. Joining us, we have two actually very knowledgeable people who have been working on this. We have Desiree Tolis, we have Jeffrey Duda, and Desiree is from Oregon State University. Jeffrey's from the U.S. Geological Survey. And thank you both for being here with us. Appreciate that a lot. And I want to kind of start off with this and actually talk to you about, or maybe have you explain how this research got started to get to the point to where we have this tool to really analyze the cost.
Thanks, Greg, and I appreciate the invitation to be on with you here today. This is a long-term project that we've been working on. Desiree and I, with a bunch of colleagues a number of years ago, tried to get together and synthesize what we know scientifically about dam removal. And one of the first steps that we took in that project was to assemble all of the literature associated with dam removal and the effects of dam removal on the biology, water quality, and physical aspects of river ecosystems. And as part of doing that, we assembled a database that kept track of all of those different studies that have been done to date. And we published that out. It's called the Dam Removal Information Portal. And it's a resource that people, practitioners, scientists, decision makers can use to find out information about dam removal projects. And as part of the rollout of that project, what we did was we were looking for input to see how we were doing and what features people might want to have added to that. And the overwhelming response was cost estimates. What can we do about getting similar information gathered about what these dam removals cost? And so at that time, we started to search for as much information about the reported total costs of dam removal as we could find. And so it took off from there. The database itself is, we were able to find out of the roughly 2,000 dams that have been removed so far, about 668 estimates of dam removal cost. But then we also were interested in the characteristics of the dam, the size of the dam, what materials it was constructed out of, the characteristics of the river that the dam occurred on, and then several characteristics of the dam removal project itself, kind of related to three kind of categories that are related to the complexity of the project. The construction and deconstruction elements, the kind of mitigation for lost function, and then what do you want the site to look like after the dam removal project is completed. And that is all really related to the complexity of the project. And so from there, we were able to then do a bunch of analyses, which was the topic of the paper that prompted this interview.
Yeah, that is a lot of data, I would imagine, to go through, kind of analyzing all of that number of years of different ways and different kind of variables that go into that. Taking that, what was the process of getting all of that information and then getting to that next step?
Yeah, well, we took a couple of different approaches. It's a detective, story in some regards, and just trying to search for information on, using Google, going through government documents, various reports, scientific publications, presentations, and compiling and extracting as much of the information as we could. And then, we knew that we would have those total costs, rough kind of estimates of total dam removal costs, but we were also kind of aware that that wasn't going to be enough and that we'd have to really get detailed kind of line by line items. And that's where Desiree and her team came in to get more detailed costs of a smaller number of dams to complement what we had done with this larger 668 dam removal database.
Yeah, and actually,
feel like that's where some of the more interesting results came from. Maybe I'm biased, but it's, with these projects, we tend to think of that size matters, the bigger dam's going to be more expensive. But the reality is, and there is some truth to that, right? Size and complexity matters. But what we find at sort of the micro scale is that, it's not, these aren't typical infrastructure projects. It's not just about time and materials. Things like construction costs, they weren't always the biggest drivers of the project cost. Our database showed that like the actual demolition costs tend to be only around 35 to 40%, whereas nearly half of the costs were associated with stabilizing the site, restoring the site after the dam was removed. There's another big chunk that's associated with mitigation of the lost function of the dam or some of the short-term impacts of the dam removal. So that part I think is really unique to dam removal and is sort of some of the more interesting, juicy nuggets, aside from just how much we're actually spending on dam removal and this, the broader big picture ideas. I think there was a lot of little nuanced surprises that came out of this effort as well.
Well, I would imagine too, depending on where the dam is, there's different environmental factors that go into each one of those things to factor in when you're trying to determine those costs. So that's a tremendous undertaking. Some of the terrain in Oregon is similar. I would imagine you can extrapolate some information from that. But if you look at it from across the nation, I mean that's a lot of different terrains, a lot of different factors that go into there when you're removing a dam. How complicated is that to try to determine this for each one of these things?
Well, I'll say it wasn't just about the terrain and the size and geography. Like some of the surprises were around, for me at least, were around local permitting. The story of like how local permitters or local interested parties, how they engaged they were, how much they required in terms of monitoring and managing of sediment in particular. How dams store sediment. We got to decide how to manage that sediment when the dams come down, and a lot of that's driven by local parties, whether it's the regulators or it's the local landowners around the dams. So there's definitely that sort of geographic story to it, but it's only partly told by sort of geology. It's largely sort of a story about people and who's sort of driving the process.
It's always the paperwork that it comes down to. Well, and there are so many different reasons that some of these dams are being removed, and I know this is actually in part of the press release that you put out that this is a trend nationwide of removing dams. And it seems like there's been quite a few over the last couple of decades, but that's expected to pick up over the next coming years. What are some of the reasons for that?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to understand just the scale of the issue in terms of infrastructure. There's 91,000 plus dams in the National Inventory of Dams that generally keeps track of larger dams. But if you look at all dams, it's somewhere around 2 million is the estimate of the total number of dams that exist in the United States. And so over time, those dams age. They start to show their age, and then society is faced with making a decision about whether to repair, replace, or remove the dam. And there's a lot of decisions that go into that, depending on if the dam is functioning or not, and whether it's more worthwhile to remove it or to replace it and to continue the functions that it's providing. And so a lot of those decisions get made kind of at a local level and are really context dependent. But the idea of putting together this cost database and then kind of a tool that we can use to estimate cost is that decision makers will have a way to kind of weigh the benefits and the cost of all the different options that are available to them, including dam removal.
Which has got to be certainly a huge benefit to going back to whoever those local decision makers are, the people that have to factor all of that in to be able to get that cost estimate. Probably makes it a lot easier to figure out which direction to go as well. In addition to all those other factors. Something else I wanted to bring up too, and just since I have you both on here, you're experts in this. We hear a lot about some of the dams on the Klamath River. They're in Southern Oregon, Northern California, and I know there's one project that's going forward right now. There's some other dams. Is that typical of what you usually see when it comes to dam removal?
Well, the Klamath is the world's largest dam removal, and it's really exciting for a lot of reasons. But it's so much bigger than what typically occurs. And it does get a lot of media attention, but the vast majority of dam removals are small. They aren't these big charismatic dams that you see exploding with dynamite on the news. And they're really more these dinky little dams that most people don't even know are on the landscape. I mean, in our database, over 76% of the dams were small dams, so like less than 15 feet tall. But that doesn't mean that those small dams don't matter. These are pictures from the Rogue River. This is one of the first dam removals in Oregon. It's a Savage Rapids Dam. It was a major fish passage barrier. And so whether the dam is 10 feet tall or it's 100 feet tall, it doesn't matter if you're a fish, it still has an important impact on blocking passage. So really, the Klamath is a really exciting project, but it is not representative of the vast majority of dam removals in the U.S.
Gotcha. I think that's very good to know because, like you said, a small dam like that, you may not even know it's there. It could be even unaware of that. So all of those are factoring into this. That is such a huge amount of research. Just going back to that you've compiled here, that's a lot. 2 million dams is what you said, estimated?
That's the estimate of the total number of dams that are on the landscape. In terms of dam removal, American Rivers is a NGO that has been keeping track of the dams that have been removed in the United States, and their current estimate is just over 2,000 dams that have been removed. So, multiple orders of magnitude more dams in place than have been removed. And the thing to remember is some of these dams are hundreds of years old. They were built in a bygone era, and the purpose that they were built for is no longer being met. And so those are generally good candidates for removal. In other cases, dams can be dangerous. They can be structurally deficient. They can be, and in the case of if there's a misoperation or if they fail, and unfortunately our history is replete with many examples of dam failures causing significant economic, environmental, and in some tragic cases, the loss of human life. And so that's another suite of reasons to remove dams. And then finally, the potential for restoring river ecosystems and the biology associated with them, like aquatic organisms that are migratory. Many dams are built without any provision to pass organisms like fish. And so before the dam was built, fish can migrate freely. You put a dam in place without any provision for fish passage, and it limits the ability of fish to make it into their spawning and rearing habitats upstream. And so those also are candidates for removals as well.
So for the next steps, with all this information that you've gathered that's available for them, how are you disseminating this information to some of those local decision makers?
Yeah, so we just published a paper in a scientific journal that kind of describes the patterns and the trends and what the drivers of dam removal cost are. We've also created an estimator of dam removal costs that is available online, and you can put in the size of the dam, where it's located in the world, and an estimate of how complex the project is going to be, and then come up with a suite or a range of costs that could be potentially associated with that project as a planning level kind of first step tool to use to come up with a cost estimates and a potential of what a project might cost, which is needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
In many cases.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, certainly needed for all kinds of different reasons. And that's something very valuable that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very excited to be able to use to estimate those things. Anything else that you want to add in, Desiree or Jeffrey, either one, about this project?
I think I would just like to emphasize sort of how much we've already invested in dam removal. Our database shows that in 2020 dollars, before all the crazy inflation has happened, it was around $1.52 billion dollars that we've spent on dam removal so far. That's only about 35% of the dams that have been removed. So that number, if we scale it up somewhere to the 2,000 number of dams that have been removed, we're talking close to $4.5 billion. And that is such a small drop in the bucket when we think about the 1.5 to 2 million dams on the landscape. So it sounds like a big number, and yet we have aging infrastructure across the landscape that we're going to have to face soon, in the next generation in terms of how we manage it. And these are parts of our infrastructure we tend to ignore, but it's a really critical part. And so I feel like an important contribution of the work that we did was to start to put numbers to these things so we can start to really be realistic about what it's going to take to maintain the infrastructure or remove the infrastructure that we have.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating research, and like you said, it's going to be very valuable, to everybody down the line. I mean, this is something that's going to be affecting whether that's the next generation or decades from now too, because that's a lot of dams to be removed for all of those different reasons. I appreciate you both so much joining, because this does make it a lot clearer of an understanding of why it is, some of the reasons are that these dams are being removed, and how to go about it, and why it's important for this kind of research, the important research that you're doing, so people have the tools at their hands to make these decisions, on what to do with these. Thank you both. Thank you both so much for being here on Fox 12 Now. Really, really appreciate it, and we'll get a link up to some of the research paper that you put out, and some of the other information that you've shared with us today too. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Bye.
And thank you to everybody too who joins us here on Fox 12 Now. Appreciate you joining this show. Again, we broadcast live. We're live here from our Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. This is the digital news desk, and this is where we get to have these longer form interviews. We get to actually talk about these things and break them down, and have a more intricate conversation about some of these issues. And we do this every single day. Like I mentioned, you can watch the rest of our interviews at our Fox 12 Oregon YouTube channel. And I appreciate all of you being here and being a part of this. It's great to have you here, and we are here every day, so we'll be back tomorrow. Like I said, 1 p.m. Pacific. Unless some breaking news comes in, I will talk to you then. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.